All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is week 4 of our Monday critique session, and I am here today with Wendy. And I actually got it right. Yay, Wendy. Wendy writes adult speculative fiction and is currently working on a historical. And she is here today to help us critique everything. Wendy, do you want to say a couple words about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited. I love doing critiques. I love helping people sort of, get to that next stage. A lot of people have helped me, so, passing it forward.
Mm-hmm.
I write, like you said, speculative fiction, fantasy. I'm just finished a historical fiction, and you guys actually critiqued it a couple weeks ago, week ago.
Nice.
Right? I don't know.
Probably.
I'm losing my mind. And it was really helpful. Yeah. So it was really helpful. So I just excited to help someone out.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, today we were supposed to have 2 people. We were supposed to have Lindsay and Becca, but I never got Becca's pages. I'm not sure if she had something that came up today or she just didn't log on to her phone to see that she'd won. But Becca didn't send her pages in. So today we're just going to do Lindsay. And then Becca, if you watch this later, you are welcome to send us your pages and we will be happy to critique them over email and send them back to you later. But today should be a pretty short one because we're just going to read one page and talk about it. So today we are going to go over, let's see, we're going to get this ready. Okay. So today we are going to add The Dragon Bride, which is a YA fantasy by Lindsay. So we'll get started. For whatever it's worth, Princess, the man had said as he sealed her inside the intricately decorated litter, I am sorry. Sorry. Everyone who'd seen her over these last several days had always been so quick to proffer their apologies, when they knew as well as she did they were worth as much as the breath that carried them. She was going to die. How much did their condolences and their apologies mean when she was dead? Her father had come to see her one last time, even though he had been the one to condemn her. The seamstress who had draped the traditional red and gold embroidered robe over her, even her handmaiden who had taken such care to paint her cheeks and nose with the ceremonial kohl and flecks of gold. All of them had apologized. But did their apologies matter now? She was locked in a palanquin on the way to face her own death, to be sacrificed for her own father's ambitions. No, she had decided, as her other maid braided her hair and pinned it in place with jeweled hairpins, their apologies didn't matter. They were complicit as well. She had stared at herself in the mirror for a long time before they had finally ushered her into the courtyard where the palanquin was waiting. She had always expected to look like this one day, as the bride to some faraway prince or some rebellious lord to keep them in line. She never expected to wear the most formal of the royal gowns in a marriage to a dragon. That's what they called it, a marriage. But everybody knew the truth. It was the truth that had haunted her these past several nights in the quiet of her rooms. Those who became the bride of the dragon never came back. There were never any bodies, never any bones returned to their families, but they were never seen again. The implication was obvious. Dragons had never been common by any means, and the years had done little to bolster their numbers, but they were still fearsome things, able to level entire countries within a fortnight. Thus, whenever one flew down from their mountaintop cave demanding sacrifice, most were happy to concede all the dragon desired. On occasion, there would be a foolhardy knight who would attempt some great quest to slay the dragon, making demands of their people, and on some occasions, those foolhardy knights would even succeed, which only drove to stoke Ava's anger. There had been a great many nights, and her father had always said she was his favorite daughter. Why not at least try to slay the beast before offering her up like a suckling pig? She wasn't stupid. She understood this was the simplest way to protect her country and its people, but understanding didn't quell the ache in her chest, didn't soften the beat of her heart in her ears, or the fire that burned in her stomach. Couldn't he have tried, at least once? The gentle rocking of the litter stopped, and low murmurs drifted through the lattice windows. Ava leaned close, trying to hear what they were saying, yet no matter how she strained, she couldn't discern the muffled words. Suddenly, the litter was moving again, but it wasn't the gentle bobbing that had occupied the last several hours. It was a gentle swoop and a sudden jolt of the litter hitting the ground, and then it was still. Ava waited. Nothing. She pressed her ear to the windows again. There was no more muffled murmurs, not even the faintest sound of footsteps falling away. There was the chirp of birds, the faintest roar of a river, but the men who had carried her into the woods were gone. She had been told by her governess that the dragon would be watching their journey to the place in the forest, that he would wait until her father's guard had retreated a distance away, and then he would come and take her to her destiny, to her death. Ava wasn't going to wait that long. But what could she do? She'd spent the entire ride trying to come up with a plan, running her hands over the silk of the litter's pillows in an effort to keep herself calm. The door of the palanquin had been locked from the outside, and she had not even dared to attempt escape while her father's men were carrying her to her doom. Even if she had gotten free, she would not have gotten far in her silk shoes before they caught her. But now she was alone, at least for a moment. She had a chance, however small. She shifted onto her knees and pushed against the closed wooden door, the silk screen that covered the delicate carvings. As she expected, it was locked and only gave a little. She shook it again, and the door shuddered and clattered but didn't open. She cursed under her breath. She had to get out of here. She would not die. Not here. Not now. She refused. Death himself could come to take her, and she would rebuff his advances. She slid the sapphire hairpin out of her hair, and her braid, no longer tethered by the pin, tumbled down her back. She leaned against the door with as much weight as she could muster. It was just enough that she could slide the pin through the gap in the doors. She continued to press her weight against the door, sliding the pin up towards where the latch was. She worked it for a moment, shifting the pin up and down, trying to catch the hook of the latch and finally she felt it catch. She leaned back and pushed up, and the door to the palanquin swung open. She winced at the sudden brightness, but there was no time to let her eyes adjust to the light of day. She crawled out onto the great stone platform. She had been here once, a Security's child with a friend. She remembered the great stone platform, 6 meters across, the river running by it. She supposed once upon a time it might have even been beautiful, but at the time she'd found it disappointing, the ravages of time having left its imprint on the altar. The intervening years had not been kind to it either. As soon as she was clear of the litter, she began to run as fast as her legs would take her. She ran across the platform, past the stone arch and altar, the cruel mockery of her fate. It was barely visible under the vines that grew up to ensnare the great gray rock. She raced towards the great stone steps they'd carried her litter up. Each stone was almost half as tall as she was, and it took some effort to ease herself down onto the first one from the platform. She crossed over, ready to inch her way off the second, but startled back when she came face to face with an outstretched hand of a man. She didn't recognize him. He wasn't one of her father's men. She could tell that much. The tattered leather and chainmail dotted with rust would never have been acceptable at court. Even the hilt of one of the 2 swords he carried was covered in rust, although there was a gleaming blue jewel embedded in it, shining despite the general lack of upkeep. She couldn't even see his face under his helm. Maybe a hedge knight? She stared at him, trying to puzzle it out. He offered his hand again. "I must admit, this makes things easier, Princess," he said, holding his hand up for her to take. "Here, I'll help you down." Ava glanced over her shoulder at the palanquin she just escaped. The dragon was on his way, but she was still a princess, and princesses did not allow strange men to touch them. "I'm more than capable," she said with a sniff, sitting down at the edge of the next stone and starting her ungraceful shimmy again. She was thankful for the looseness of the robe then, even as the man shrugged and turned down to hop down with ease. Her tiptoes had just brushed the hard rock of the last step when the man offered his hand again. "I'm fine, thank you," she huffed, starting to crouch down to reach the solid earth. The man opened his mouth in response, but his words were drowned out by the ear-splitting roar. The earth shook and rolled beneath them, and it was quiet save for the shriek of birds that had been so rudely jostled from their perch. The man offered his hand again. She took it, not a word, another word passing between them, and he helped her down off the last meter-tall step. "This way," he said, not letting her hand go, but guiding her back towards the main forest road. The path that led to the platform was narrow and scarcely used, and it was clear the man leading her wasn't familiar with it either. Low-hanging branches crowded the path, scattered needles on the ground that they brushed against them. "Who are you?" she asked. "There's time for that later, Princess," the knight said, "after I've rescued you." Ava scoffed. She was doing quite well rescuing herself, thank you very much. She opened her mouth to contest the claim. There was another roar, and her protest died on her tongue. There was time for talk later. She yanked her hand from his and hurried ahead, trying to ignore the ache in her feet. Each errant stone and branch embedded in the dirt tore into the silk slippers that passed as shoes in her wedding regalia. She would have to find new shoes. Finally, she could see it, the wide dirt expanse of the main road, the one she had ridden on countless times in her youth, her way home. Right at the end of the path, there was a dark bay horse stamping its feet, clearly agitated by the roar that still seemed to reverberate through the trees. Its reins were tossed loosely over a branch. Was it the knight's? She looked back at him, still lacking a little bit behind her, and fighting with a branch as that he had stumbled into. Was this truly supposed to be her rescuer, a ransomer? She wasn't going to wait to find out. She rushed ahead, grabbed the leather reins off the branch, and climbed up onto the horse. "Hey!" the man shouted behind her, although Ava didn't look back at him. She snapped the reins, and the horse took off, throwing its head and braying before giving in to her urging. Ooh, stole the horse. Oh, man.
Well done.
Right. I love it. I'll start by saying I adore dragons. Like the second you're like the dragon bride, I'm like, you don't say. Like, I just love them so much. So like this makes me really happy that there's just like dragons in the air. I'm thinking maybe the guy might be a dragon, thinking that that would make a lot of sense. And I don't know if he's like a dragon who like maybe is like going against the dragon that's flying in the sky. Like maybe he's like the son of the dragon that was supposed to wed her, and he's just like, not this one, or what. Like I love the mystery around the dragons and like what they do with these brides, and like, you know, there's so much mystery. I love it.
I'm pretty sure like she's dropping some, there's like a plot element there that I picked up, and I hope that it's true, because I kind of love it, about the dragons being, the brides disappear, but they don't find any bones. So he's not, the dragons aren't eating them, but something is going on, something magical, something, you know, otherworldly, something that he turns into a man, the dragons turn into a man, or they have a symbiotic relationship. Like I love those kinds of, you know, dragon stories too.
I was like, I definitely agree. There was, I don't know if you've ever read this book, but if you haven't, you know, Lindsay, you should. There was a book called Dragon's Bait, and it was a middle grade book. I guess it was a young adult book. Technically, it was, I mean, the main character. We lost Wendy again. Oh, this happened last time. She'll come back. Hang on. Wendy, are you back? Hello. Anyway, yeah, there was this book called Dragon's Bait, and it was about a girl whose village basically was convinced that she was a witch and decided to sacrifice her to the local dragon. And instead of eating her, he decided to help her get revenge on the people who put her on the stake.
Nice.
And he could turn into a human, and like and it was just like the best revenge story ever. Like I read that book like 18 times. It was amazing. It's super short, but like highly recommend if you've never read it, because I think that it has a lot of the same types of like feel as this one does. With just like the girl getting sacrificed, you know, for the betterment of the kingdom kind of thing. But really, they just like don't want to deal with the drama of the dragons coming around. You know, like that's basically what this is. They're just too lazy to deal with the dragons,
or even question the procedure.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like why are like I like that this opens up all of those questions about like, wow, her family sucks. Like they're not even trying to keep her around, you know. And I think that's really cool. I think that that's like a very unique thing. That's a very unique thing to accomplish in a first chapter. There's definitely a lot here for that.
Yeah, I like
Oh, go ahead.
I just, to back that up, I like that was one of my notes, was I like the comment about the dad, how he's kind of a lazy turd for not, you know, not even questioning it. He's just he's like lazy about it. Yeah, he's like, yeah, take my daughter. I'm cool with it.
Right, and it even makes it worse that he's like, oh, you're my favorite daughter, and then 3 seconons later he turns around and hands her off to the dragon.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Wow, that sucks.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, I can picture him. He's just like you know, kind of like lazy and
just like this entitled king who's just like, well, the dragons are coming, you know. But I do think there could be more like dramatic politics in play there, you know. Like she might think that he's doing that, and we're getting that feel because it's from her point of view. But like for all we know, the dragon like literally could level his kingdom in, you know, a fortnight, like they mentioned in here. And I mean, there are definitely politics at play that I wonder if the main character is aware of or cares about. It doesn't seem like she does, but I imagine that there's more going on in the background with that. So I think that Wendy and I both agree that the format of this, and I know I keep mentioning format. You know, when you're writing it on your own, it's not a big deal, but you know, just make sure that if you ever send this off to an agent, you're going to be doing the you know, the normal no spacing, double spaced, you know, moving in like this kind of thing, and then deleting these like middle lines so that it actually is double spaced all the way around. And just make sure that it's, you know, Times New Roman, or, I mean, this looks like Calibri. That's fine too. But just make sure that when you send
Arial.
Arial.
I think it was Arial, yeah.
Okay. So just make sure that when you send it off to a literary agent, you actually have it set in this type of format. There should be a header at the top that has, you know, your last name, the title of the book, and then the page number. There should be a title page that says, you know, your address, your information, the name, the title, all that stuff, and how many words it is. And those formats are all available online. You should not have a problem finding a manuscript format, but just be aware that that is a requirement when you're sending things off to literary agents. They're going to be expecting it in that format. The other thing too is to make sure that you go through with a fine tooth comb and get like the grammar done. So like this kind of thing, like for what it's worth, I mean, this is kind of a continuation, so that one's fine, but there are a couple comma splices that I noticed in here. I think there was one down here. Let me see if I can find it. Now that I've changed the formatting, I might not be able to.
So while she's looking, I'll speak to the dialogue tags. Mm-hmm. So Lindsay, when you're looking at people who are speaking, and it's not necessarily in the past tense, like on that first paragraph is the man had said. So that's not actually a dialogue tag. That's like a memory of a dialogue. But if someone is speaking in the present tense, in the present time, like this, what's on the screen right now, who are you? She asked. So she would be lowercase.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then on the next line, that there is time for that later princess. So that would be princess, comma, and then lowercase the night.
Yeah. Well, and if you're going to, I mean, this technically could be correct, just because he is then saying this part. It's just odd to be doing it with a sentence after he's already said a sentence.
No, I'm saying the night, like the word the should be lowercase.
Yeah.
Yes. And you're right. Like after, and then after would be, that could be a capitalization, or that could be a lowercase if there's a comma after said.
Right. Right. So yeah. So if you're going to be doing this, you're going to want to make sure that it's lowercase, because then it's kind of like, it's one sentence for him to say. So I agree that like those kinds of things. And then the comma splicing, I noticed a couple of them, but this was the one that really stuck out to me. Like Ava scoffed. Right. She was doing the best that she could. She was doing quite well of rescuing herself. Not a dash here. Thank you very much. Period. So going back through and making those things, I think, are important to make sure that you don't miss those, especially in a first chapter, just because you have so little time to impress a literary agent. Right. But if they see a bunch of these, like, someone's going to have to edit all that, and it's probably going to be the agent. So if they can see that there's not too many grammatical errors for them, they might be more inclined to give you a little bit more of their time, because they know that you won't take as much of it later on. So I would definitely get well versed in that. The other thing that I noticed was that you have a lot of, you start a lot of sentences with she. I mean, there's she up here, she up here, she up here. When you do that type of sentence structure so much, it gets a little repetitive and kind of boring almost for the reader, just because it's the same type of sentence structure over and over and over again. And even here, like this is still the same type of sentence structure. So if you really want to add some variety to your writing to kind of, I mean, you already have a really good writing style, but like if you wanted to kind of take it to that next level, try to find a way where it doesn't start with her name or she or a pronoun, where maybe like, maybe something like this could be like the outstretched hand of a man interrupted her and she stopped short, and then suddenly now it's starting not with she, but with the outstretched hand of a man. And it's a little more of like a jolt for us, if that makes sense.
And that's really easy stuff to fix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just sentence structure at that point. It's just kind of going back through and playing with like the musical tone almost of a language.
The tone of the reading.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And I actually think that's one of the most fun things to do. Like, I love playing around with sentence structure to see what I can accomplish and what I can make my readers feel just by writing certain things. Or like, one of the things I think you did really well was this part right here, how that was on its own line. Like that really kind of, it seemed kind of a little like distant, where she's kind of like, oh, she wasn't stupid. She's a little annoyed. They're all complicit. But then like this point kind of made you feel for her, because you're like, wow, she's really upset about this. Like, she's trying not to let on, but like, she's really upset that her dad just threw her to the wolves, Yeah. So I think that was done really, really well. I was confused about litter. I don't know if this is a word for Pelican.
It is. It actually is.
Okay, it might just be me. I'm like, my vocabulary kind of sucks. So like,
Becca and I are apparently like super dorky and stupid, but we went right to like kittens and litter.
We were both just like, oh, she's rescuing kittens. Like,
so on that, on litter, because it's not a word that's actually used anymore. And even in certain countries, is it used? And, I mean, who's writing in a litter? You know what I mean? So one of the things that I wrote down was, it's such an interesting way to open your story, that instead of, talking about the litter in, almost like there's a lot of, especially in the opening paragraph, there's a lot of reflection on what has happened. And I would love to see the litter described in the beginning, her being put into it, instead of saying litter, what does it look like? It's a box that's carried by people, basically.
Right. Well, and then you mentioned the Lattice. At some point I should have changed the formatting. Now I can't find anything. At some point, yeah, here we go. You mentioned the Lattice windows, but then she like leans close and like tries to hear, but she can't see anything. And that confused me because like you can see through Lattice windows. So I wonder if there's like are there drapes that are covering those Lattice windows from the outside that she can't move? That kind of thing I think could be helped by describing the palanquin. I mean, it's basically her coffin. I want to know what it looks like, you know?
Yeah. And that could be done because it's such a compelling opening, she's basically in a prison, in a mobile prison. And it would, just to see that right from the beginning, I don't like, there's a section, a couple of paragraphs in, about her looking in the mirror and looking at herself in the wedding dress. And that's cool. I like that we're seeing her, she's kind of, in this marriage, preparing to be married to a dragon. But I would love to see like her experience of being sealed into that box.
Yeah.
What's like all that stuff that Lindsay has, down in the pages. Let's move that up a little bit to the top, maybe.
Right.
And that's like, that would hook me right away. Like, okay, I know.
And it'd be super easy to do because, all you'd have to do is do something like the scene, like maybe the lady in waiting who's maybe been waiting on her for decades, like how old is this girl? We don't ever find out her age, which is important in YA. You're going to definitely want to clarify how old she is. So you could be like, my lady in waiting since I was born for 16 years, and then suddenly we know her age. But she could have her like whisper, like, I'm so sorry.
Right. And then shut the door.
Yeah. Like, and then, well, I mean, I was even thinking back up further, have like the lady in waiting, like right before she walks down the stairs to like all of these guards that are standing, to make it look like it's some like very regal event. Like, wow, it's such an honor to be given to the dragon because you're saving the rest of the kingdom. And then she sees the palanquin in the distance and like knows that that's basically.
And then they like drag her ass in.
Yeah. And she kind of like hesitates and they like shove her in, And in the meantime, like maybe her dad is watching from afar. Like he doesn't even have the decency to come down and say goodbye. He could just be like standing on it, like a dais somewhere, watching them shove her in and then take her away. And I think that something like that. Something like that.
Looks away and he's like,
exactly. Like you could get so much out of their relationship just by that one moment where like she meets his gaze, he meets her gaze, and then he coughs and looks away, and she's kind of like, wow, thanks, I also think that instead of saying something like oh my God, where was it? Okay, so this part, whenever one flew down from the mountaintop to demand sacrifice, most were happy to concede all the dragon desired because they could level entire countries in a fortnight. Instead of saying that, show us that. Like, while she's walking, like maybe the reason that the king agreed to give the daughter up is because one of their villages was attacked by this dragon while he made his request, and so maybe when they're carrying the palanquin, she can see through the lattice windows and can watch just the destruction spreading out from, before her. Like that would be more resonating, I think, in a first chapter than something else, than just being like, oh, they destroy things. Well, all right. I mean, like, we haven't seen that. So how do we really know how dangerous they are until then?
Right. And even if, and I think what we're saying here is like, we want to see, there's all this beautiful writing and we want to be able to see it for ourselves. And even if, because you're laying a lot of, I was picking up a lot of plot elements that the dragons aren't what people think they are, even if even if this destruction is more, sort of urban legend, then how about a picture or a mural or something?
Yeah. Murals are a really great way to do that.
Yeah.
I know that because the book that I got represented by was a book with dragons in it, and it was nothing like this, but still had dragons, and that was one of the ways that I actually did that was by like I mentioned that there was a attack that happened 5 years ago, like the battle of this city, happened 5 years ago, and she like walked past the rubble that they were still cleaning up 5 years later because it was that devastating of a battle. And then there was a mural that like depicted the most dramatic moment where like her mother was basically killed by the dragon to end the fight.
Right.
And the mural, like people actually, like the agents that read it really liked that because it was a very simple way to show that like this is ingrained in their history. It's part of their culture at this point, like it happened and it's never going to be forgotten. So yeah, I think even, if you're not going to do like the destruction of the village, I think that a mural is a really great way to go.
Yeah, she could even pass it as she's, as
she's
easily
during her mark of death. Yep, exactly. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Well, or I mean, there could even be somebody like, we're just going to brainstorm your whole novel for you. There could even be somebody like, like standing over there who's about to like read, like, because how they have those court announcers,
Right.
So maybe it could be a court announcer where he's standing there and he's like reading and he's like, all hail Princess Ava, who is taking one for the team and being a dragon's wife so that we live another generation, kind of thing.
Right.
Like he could be announcing it to the court while she's walking to the palanquin, and then we could get to see like her thoughts versus what is actually happening. Like I think that kind of dichotomy between like, oh, you're doing something amazing for your country versus like I'm about to die for my country is a really powerful image in the first chapter. So I think that this chapter, I think, starts at exactly the right point. I think you just need to stop telling and start showing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think
it is a great opening. Mm-hmm. It's just nail those especially that first page. Mm-hmm. Just figure out where you want the reader, what you want them to see.
Mm-hmm. Right. Like how do you want them to feel about this, and how does she feel about this? I think that ultimately could be, the really big thing. The other thing that I kind of would like to see is a little bit more lead-in with the guy, because I feel like that happened very quickly.
The night.
Yeah, the night. I should never change the formatting of this. I'm so sorry. Okay, here we go. So you couldn't even see his face under his helm, but then a little later, you have him smiling. Let me see. Hang on. There was one point where he smiled. Or
I like the introduction. I think there's some really I'm a swordsman or swordswoman person, whatever you want to say that. So there was some. I enjoyed the introduction of him while you're looking for that.
Sorry,
I'm talking. So like the rust on the hilt was a really nice touch. Even though the jewel could be seen, the visual representation of his poor care of his weapons was very telling. So I enjoyed that. And I will say that this night, I know that he has a pivotal role because he found her literally right away. And like, he's definitely, I don't know if I like to tell people when I'm doing critiques of what I'm reading between the lines. And he is a pivotal character, or I'm reading that he's a pivotal character in the story. So.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's super obvious that he's going to have a really big role in this, which is great. I think that, So I thought that he showed his face at some point, and I remember being confused because I thought that you'd also mentioned that you couldn't see his face, but I can't find it now. So maybe I'm crazy.
Well, if he's wearing a helmet, you can't. You can only see possibly his eyes.
Yeah, but I thought that I remembered him smiling, and I was like, that's weird, but I might be wrong. I think that where you could maybe lead into this a little bit before she runs into the outstretched hand. Could you potentially, while she's running away, like maybe in the sudden silence, she almost thinks that she hears footsteps, and like, and then is maybe perplexed because like, what if one of my father's men came back or something, just to kind of imply that she's not alone there, so that when we actually do see him here, we're not like super surprised. We're more like intrigued, like, ooh, who's following her? Why is he here? You know, is he dangerous? Is he going to be more dangerous than the dragon? You know, so I think something like that could help kind of lead in and hint that this is about to happen, so your readers don't get whiplash when he shows up and offers a hand. And she, and I don't know, I almost would like a little bit more hesitation here. Like I almost would like you to start breaking these paragraphs up and doing something, you know, maybe where she kind of like, instead of like, she doesn't recognize him. Well, how does that make her feel? Can we get a paragraph about how that makes her feel in this moment, as opposed to just jumping into what he looks like? Like he wasn't one of her father's men. Does she feel scared about that? Is she like intimidated? Is she grateful that he's there to help her? You know, like I think I would like a little bit more of her character here.
I think what I read there, like I didn't have the same reaction. I think what I read was that she's kind of arrogant, like she's a princess. She's like, she's like, he's not one of ours. So
right,
I don't know who he is. Like she, and I don't, again, that's something I was reading between the lines, that she's a little bit, you know, got that sort of princess.
Right. Well, and I think I would, the reason I'm hoping that maybe this could be used as a bit of a world building tactic is because, like, does she have a lot of contact with people who are not her father's men? You know, like, how would that make her feel? How has she been prepared to interact with people who are not in her immediate court? Those are things that could be world building tactics that, like, you know, how she reacts to him will tell me a lot about how she grew up. So I think that that's something that I would like to see a little more in this interaction. Not so much her fleeing the dragon, but like her manners even coming back, where she's, you know, maybe she's supposed to be super polite, and like she doesn't seem like she's super polite because, you know, she's kind of like, I'm more than capable, go away. We lost Wendy again. This is weird. I don't know why you keep vanishing.
The internet, everything hates me today, especially the internet.
I'm like, honestly, the internet is usually the problem, I think. Anyway, I think that, I just think that like there could be world building. Like we don't even know the name of her country. We don't know the name of her father. We don't know. I didn't know how many siblings does she have? You mentioned that he's, you know, she's his favorite daughter, but we don't find out anything about her family or how they feel about this. And I think that since this is such a brief interlude where you have that time to show us what's happening in her home before you take her to the dragon's den, I think that this is a really good place to establish all those things. And that's why first chapters are so hard, because there's so much to put in that like you just have to try to overload it, you know, but like still
well, I think it's not overloading with world building. It's balancing all of that stuff. And one piece of advice that I've heard that is probably one of my favorites that I keep taking is that if there's an element of your story that you don't want to delve into at that moment, then don't talk about it. So like if she has a big family, just don't mention it. Yeah,
don't even mention. Yeah, that's a good idea.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like if you're stuck.
Right. Yeah. Usually when I'm doing world building, I try to go by that iceberg method, where like you would know everything, but like you only show the little tip. And I actually feel like this does that really well, because I'm not overloaded by world building, but I almost think like there could be a couple sentences here or there that add just those last couple details that like really make it rich and feel like it's a world, you know.
But it almost feels a little bit like middle grade, in that the plot drives pretty fast.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple, you know, and you know, which I like. It's just if you're gonna sell it as YA, you know, it's probably gonna have to come off a little bit differently. Like you're really familiar with YA, and I know there's a lot of world building. So
right. Well, and I think with YA specifically, like I do middle grade too and YA. So the difference between them, in my opinion, is that YA is expected to have politics. There's this expected to have subtext. There's subplots that are going on around your main character that your main character is aware of, but can't delve into for certain reasons. So like, I think that is kind of where you can really, like, in order to make this sound more YA, imply that there's politics behind the scenes with this dragon, you know, imply that there's maybe another country who got destroyed and like people are dying over there, like bring the stakes up and imply that there's a world that exists around this main character. So like this moment sucks for her, but like there's probably a very good reason within her world as to why her father agreed to this. And those kind of like overarching, like if you ever saw the show Avatar, The Last Airbender, like did you ever see that? So that's kind of, I think they did that really well. Like there's a war going on, but like you don't always immediately see it, but you know it's there. And I think that's ultimately what makes something middle grade versus YA. Like middle grade characters are not super concerned with the world around them. They're more concerned with their own self and finding their friend group. And YA has to take it to that next level. Right now it's where that main character fits in with the world around her, not so much with her friends. So
that makes sense. I can see that.
Yeah, so that's just kind of my opinion on it. Whenever I try to do YA, I always try to make sure that there's like bigger events happening in the world that have nothing to do with my main character, but that still drive almost everything that happens in that story.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, I think I loved this. I thought I loved the dragons. I actually really loved this sentence of whatever you do, please don't take this out. I loved this sentence here with her handmaiden and the flecks of gold in the ceremonial coal. I thought that was beautifully done. Just like that put such and like the traditional red and embroidered robe, that put such an image in my head about what she looks like right now. I loved that line. So yeah, there's a lot of really, really awesome things in here. And I think that you're almost there. You just need to tweak how this beginning kind of operates, is my opinion. So yeah. Anything else to add, Wendy?
I was just going over my notes. So just, I think, so just watching the opening paragraphs, to really, do justice to the story, watch the opening paragraphs, figure out what you want to show, think about showing, what Ava is going through, how she feels about it. I would say try to stay away from, anywhere as you're going back through this and you see the word has or had, stop maybe and like, okay, how can I either, if I can leave that out, if it's not important, or,
or make this immediate,
make it present tense.
Exactly. Yeah.
Present tense. It's still third POV limited, but it's present tense. It's happening in the moment.
Right. Well, and that will she's not even talking like physical present tense, because like this is a past tense book, but I think what you mean is just like making it more immediate, like happening now, instead of talking about flashbacks that happened before.
Yeah, something that happened a few minutes ago or an hour ago.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that if you can nail that, you've got a stunning first chapter for this.
Yeah.
The other book, so the first book that I mentioned that you should read is Dragon's Bait. That one does read more like a middle grade. It's about as long as a middle grade, but I think the main character is older. It was published a long time ago, so I think they got away with it. But the other one that I don't know if you've ever read or heard of is called Dealing with Dragons, and it's also about a princess, but she runs away, and she goes to be a princess for a dragon, because that's a very respectable thing to do in her world. So like she was going to be married off, and she's like, I don't want to marry him, so I'm going to go be this dragon's princess instead. And her parents were like, well, we can't fault that. That's a very respectable thing to do. So I guess you'll get away with it. So she just like lived in the cave with this dragon and like made her cherries jubilee. And it was just like the best book. But highly recommend that series. There's 4 books in that series. And the first book is this princess who's just like this take no prisoners kind of princess, where like she becomes this dragon's princess. And then like these knights come to rescue her. And she just was like, I'm not here to be rescued. Go away. Like it has a very like humorous tone to it, but I highly recommend reading it. It's fantastic.
It sounds on par with a little bit of this.
Yeah. The tone is a little different in that one, because it was, like I said, it was meant to be humorous. But that one was, Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Reed. W-R-E-D.
That sounds really familiar, actually.
Yeah, it was a big book back in, I read it back in high school, but like, oh my God, I devoured them. They're so good. So anyway, if you're looking for princesses being kidnapped by dragons, those are 2 that I highly recommend, because I think they're great. So anyway, yeah, great job, Lindsay. I still haven't gotten an email from Becca, so I guess that we will end it tonight and try again, next week. So next week I am not going to be doing a critique. I'm actually getting a puppy on Sunday, which most of you already know. So I'm going to be having the puppy, and that's going to be chaotic and crazy. But I will do a live stream. I know, and amazing, yeah. But I will do a live stream to introduce you guys to my puppy. So it'll probably, baby, oh my God, baby. So cute.
Look at that face. Look at it.
God, baby, I love him.
He gets everything he wants, don't you?
My dog is like that too. He's all upset at me right now because I locked him out of the room. I was like, because he's playing constantly. Like we took him to like the dog park today, and like we went on this crazy walk, and like we went to a a restaurant and sat outside on the patio, and he got all this stimulation, and then he came home and he was like, ball, you want to throw the ball? And I'm like, be quiet.
You're like, but no, I just spent like 10 hours with you.
I'm like, the puppy isn't even here yet. Why do I feel like I already have one? So he's locked out. But yeah, so next week won't be an actual critique. Next week will just be showing the puppy off and then piecing out. But Wendy, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you helping critique. And Lindsay, of course. And Lindsay, I hope that this helped a little bit and that you've got some plans now to get started. Your stuff is awesome. Like you're almost there, But anyway, thanks so much, guys. And tune in 2 weeks for Carly and Jenny to take over. And they're doing something fun. I'm not entirely sure what, but they're taking over the live stream. So that should be fun. So on the 22nd. So anyway, thanks, guys. And have a good night. Thanks, Wendy. I appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.